Sure, you've heard of Air Force One, the luxury plane reserved specifically for whenever the US president takes to the skies, but what you might not know about is Marine One, the state-of-the-art luxury $215 million presidential helicopter often reserved for the direst emergencies, or yet another taxpayer-funded round of golf. That's right, the POTUS has their very own personal chopper, ready to be utilized anytime, anywhere. The price of your average commercial helicopter runs from lows of around $250,000 to the low millions, which begs the question, what makes Marine One so insanely expensive, with a cost around 100 times what you can expect for an average non-combat helicopter? Let's take a step inside this flying presidential suite and find out. First, we need to get technical because Marine One isn't always just one helicopter, it's the military call sign for any helicopter carrying the president, and is operated by Marine Helicopter Squadron 1, also known by the way cooler name Nighthawks, who are based in Quantico, Virginia. The two varieties of Marine One currently available are a larger variant of the Sikorsky SH-3 Sea King and the smaller, lighter Sikorsky UH-60 Blackhawk, a name you might find familiar from the 2001 movie Black Hawk Down. The respective unit costs for each of these two helicopters are typically south of $10 million, but they've still provided safety and reliability for US presidents for over a decade. However, this is expected to change in 2021 with the introduction of an entirely new piece of Marine One technology and the star of today's video, the Sikorsky VH-92A. The VH-92A is the beast with the $215 million price tag per unit. This marvel of technology has been in the works since October of 2014, when the U.S. Navy granted a $1.24 billion engineering and manufacturing development contract to Sikorsky, a subsidiary of weapons development company Lockheed Martin. After several years of development and testing, the Nighthawks themselves finally gave their seal of approval after a test takeoff and landing at the White House in 2018. Upon its release, the VH-92A will be one of the most advanced helicopters in the world, with a list of design features that would make any mechanical engineer worth their salt start blushing. So what goes into protecting the most powerful golfer on Earth? This new Marine One offers state-of-the-art encrypted mission communications technology, the Collins Aerospace ProLine communication and navigation radios, which gives Marine One full duplex satellite communication capabilities. The helicopter also takes advantage of an ARC-244A digital FM radio twinned with an MIL STD 1553 avionics data bus. In layman's terms, it uses a particularly advanced computer system to transfer data efficiently between the various component parts of the helicopter with full independence of any external computer systems. And as a little cherry on top, Marine One also has integrated onboard Wi-Fi thanks to a Wi-Fi router and Ethernet cable, so the president can tweet from above. But the cutting-edge avionics, meaning electrical equipment fitted into an aircraft, don't stop there. The cockpit, manned by one pilot and one co-pilot, also boasts two high-tech display control panels and four multifunctional display units for unparalleled awareness and control. It even features spare flight critical systems, preventing what's known as a single-point failure. Couple that with a traffic collision avoidance system, or TCAS, a health and usage monitoring system, or HUMS, an enhanced ground proximity warning system, or EGPWS, and an advanced weather radar, and you have yourself a perfect recipe for a truly presidential flight. But you're probably thinking, well, accounting for traffic and the weather is one thing, but what about other safety features? The thing costs $1/8 billion here, and we're dealing with the leader of the free world. Thankfully, the VH-92A has you covered there too. The engineers behind Marine One have truly thought of everything, including de-icing systems, lightning protection, flaw tolerance, built-in protections against electromagnetic interference to keep the helicopter protected from an electromagnetic pulse in the event of a nuclear explosion, and even bird strike protection, or if the world decides to go all Alfred Hitchcock during one of the president's flights. What if someone decides to attack the president while in transit, though? Of course, the system isn't just designed to defend against potential acts of God. Marine One is also designed to account for potential enemy attacks. One of its two main lines of defense are its laser-based directional infrared countermeasures, or DIRCMs. Because most offensive air-to-air and surface-to-air missiles work on the principle of infrared seeking, the DIRCMs on Marine One pulse out infrared flashes that confuse the tracking systems of potential incoming missiles, essentially jamming them. But that's not all Marine One has up its exceedingly expensive sleeves. The chopper is fitted with decoy launchers capable of firing out a distracting payload to redirect the attention of an incoming deadly projectile. Throw in ballistic armor and advanced sensors that can warn the pilots of impending attack far in advance, and you have a flying presidential fortress that's exceptionally hard to take down through any but the most extreme measures. But hey, nothing's foolproof. What if these defense or safety systems fail, whether from an incoming missile or a flock of particularly anti-American pigeons? If the helicopter ever fell from the sky, would it become a fiery lump of metal filled with presidential puree? Thankfully, no, because those engineers are at it again. The fuselage, meaning the main body of the aircraft, has been designated crash-worthy by all testing metrics. According to official releases from Sikorsky, the fuselage has a twin turboshaft power plant and a fully articulated composite main rotor. The helicopter's retractable tricycle landing gear includes 3 separate twin-wheel units, ensuring a soft and stable landing. And the crash safety measures don't stop there either. Special care has been taken to make sure the self-contained fuel system is as crash-worthy as physically possible, reducing the risk of a fire breaking out in the event of a crash. Even the seats are designed to absorb the energy of a crash, keeping the Marine One helicopter passengers safe if it ever came crashing down. So you can rest assured that Marine One is the safest anyone could possibly be inside a helicopter, which definitely contributes to its utterly insane price tag. The engine is no slouch in this department either. The craft is powered by 2 General Electric CT-788 turboshaft engines, each of which is probably worth more than your house. The Marine One helicopter's power plant is also fitted with a pneumatic starting system and an integral particle separator, with a Honeywell 36150 auxiliary power unit to supply emergency juice to all the revolutionary onboard systems we've just described to you. All this power equates to an impressive flying height of 14,000 feet above sea level and a startling speed of 165 knots, with a cruise speed of 151 knots. That equates to around 189 miles per hour and 174 miles per hour respectively. For some perspective, the top speed of the new Marine One is around 25 knots greater than that of an average helicopter, which typically levels out at around 140 knots. Only the best for the President of the United States. Of course, no vehicle would ever be truly presidential if it lacked the creature comforts that America's highest political office has become so synonymous with. Air Force One is a luxury plane, so is Marine One a luxury helicopter? You better believe it. In addition to the free Wi-Fi, the new Marine One has the rare helicopter luxury of true standing room at 1.83 meters or 6 feet, so President Trump, who's believed to be 6'2", would only need to crouch slightly to fit in the main cabin. The Marine One helicopter is roomy by anyone's standard with its 1.2 meter or around 4 feet width, with a capacity of around 19 passengers or 10 passengers if you want to have a little more legroom. And while helicopters are typically unbearably noisy, the Marine One cabin is designed with low acoustics in mind, so the passengers can speak to one another in a normal tone of voice despite the powerful rotor outside. While there are certain limitations to what we can currently know about the decor of the new Marine One, based on the fact that it isn't supposed to enter service until next year, we can make some reasonable assumptions from President Trump's very specific interior design tastes. Some preliminary renderings show the plush white leather interiors we've come to expect when we think of presidential opulence, as indicated by the interior of his private 757 jet and modifications to the interior of previous Marine One models. President Trump shows a preference for chrome, cream, and wood-grain surfaces, none of which come cheap. If his gold-plated New York apartment wasn't enough of a clue, President Trump has a taste for conspicuous consumption, and the interior of the new Marine One is unlikely to buck that trend. From the outside, the livery of the new Marine One is best described as classic. It's largely a dark military green with the iconic white top of all of the Marine One helicopters. This color scheme is so intrinsic to every model of Marine One that the helicopters are often colloquially known as white tops. And if you think the hefty $215 million price tag on one of them could ever leave you without any money left over for rent, wait until you hear that the US government put in an order for 6 of them as part of a first low-rate initial production contract. A little excessive, don't you think? After all, the president can only fly one of them at a time. Well, yes and no. While buying 6 Marine Ones may seem like a classic exercise in Trumpian excess, it's actually part of a wider safety tactic employed by the Nighthawks for a number of years, called the presidential shell game. In an emergency situation, when the Marine One flies, it does so with the formation of 5 identical decoy helicopters meant to protect the president's personal helicopter from attack. It seems bizarre that the US government would employ a technique typically reserved for aspiring magicians to protect the president, but seeing as Marine One hasn't been down yet, there must be something to it. While it'll never be the president's primary mode of transportation, after all, Air Force One is just more practical for long-distance and cross-country travel, it does accompany the president everywhere he goes. Marine One and its doppelgangers are typically transported along with the president's luxury limousine on either a C-17 Globemaster or a C-5 Galaxy military transport aircraft, ready to roll out and take off at a moment's notice. In a situation where the president is under direct attack, there's rarely time to gear up Air Force One for an immediate flight, and the presidential motorcade is considerably more vulnerable than Marine One to all forms of attack, from improvised bombs to roadblocks. While as helicopters go, Marine One is built with luxury in mind, it's never been the primary intention. The function of the Marine One helicopter in all its forms since President Eisenhower's tiny, cramped Bell H-13J during the Cold War is to facilitate a quick getaway for the president if the situation turns south, whether the problem is a terrorist attack or the beginning of a nuclear war. In the beginning, the duty of Marine One, once referred to instead as Army One, was shared between the U.S. Army, the Marines, and the Secret Service. The title made the final switch to Marine One in 1976 after the United States Marine Corps took over the operation entirely. Unsurprisingly, the whole program got a major shot in the arm after the September 11 attacks in 2001, with the fear of another attack on the nation's key power centers imminent. The pressure to drive innovation toward better protected presidential vehicles increased massively. It was a few years after this, and against stiff competition from other defense contractors, that Lockheed Martin and Sikorsky Aircraft secured the contract for designing and building the president's personalized Marine One helicopters from then on. While thankfully the second attack on the United States never actually came, we were left with a path of design innovation that led to the $215 million technological marvel that keeps President Trump safe today. If the United States president is lucky, they won't have to use Marine One all that much, seeing as it's reserved for less than ideal situations. However, without this piece of cutting-edge aviation technology, the president is under considerably greater risk of attack, and considerably greater risk of that attack being successful. As a heartwarming final touch, during a presidential inauguration, the Nighthawks offered the outgoing president one final ride in the Marine One from the Capitol to Joint Base Andrew, where their tenure as president officially ceases. And thanks to that $215 million price tag, it'll be the safest helicopter ride they've ever taken. Check out the insane protection of the President of the United States and the President's escape plan if the U.S. is attacked for more fascinating facts about presidential protection.